All right. Hello, everyone. It's Kirsten Hagland here, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Weekly Hope. And as many of you know who probably have joined the show before, I've got my little co-host of the show here, Elsa. She's sitting here with me with her tongue out as usual. But we're so glad that you've joined us this Wednesday afternoon. Well, afternoon for most of you in the United States. If you have tuned in before, you also know that I am broadcasting here live from Zurich, Switzerland. And one of the cool things about this show is that we have people that tune in from all over the world. So I just want to say a hello and a welcome to you. We're very glad that you found us. So before I welcome our guest who's here with us and we dive into the topic, just let you know a little bit about what we do here. So Eating Disorder Hope is a website, eatingdisorderhope.com, and we're an online mental health resource hub. We've got thousands of articles on our website, as well as obviously our social media platforms. And we do this Facebook Live interview series every Wednesday, almost, right around lunchtime for our viewers in the United States. And we like to invite clinicians, experts, authors, nonprofit leaders, people with their own recovery stories onto the show, and we talk with them about a wide variety of different topics. So we always like to hear from them and also encourage you to be a part of this conversation. So I will be monitoring the comments throughout the show. And if you've got a question, a comment, a story to tell, or you just want to say hello, we love it when people say hello. Please feel free to chime in and dive into the conversation with us, because we really love that audience feedback and we want to hear from you. That's the great thing about doing this on Facebook Live. So that's a little bit about who we are. And without any further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest who's joining us from California, right, Elyse?
Right. The land of earthquakes.
Yeah, right. I know you're going to have to tell us about that. Yes, Elyse is joining us from California today, and we are really excited and honored to have her on the show. So I'm going to read a little bit of her bio before we chat about intuitive eating, what it really is, how to cut through the noise of maybe what you've heard, and to bring some sanity into our relationship with food and our bodies. So Elyse is going to give us the lowdown on all of that. So Elyse is a nutrition therapist in private practice in Beverly Hills with over 36 years of experience specializing in eating disorders, obviously, intuitive eating, and health at every size. She is the co-author of Intuitive Eating and the Intuitive Eating Workbook, and is the author of the Intuitive Eating Workbook for Teens, which she's going to tell us all about. This is a new thing, and it's really needed. So she's going to tell us all about that. She's published journal articles, print articles, blog posts, you name it. She also does regular speaking engagements, podcasts, and extensive media interviews like this one. And her work's been profiled on CNN, NBC, KGTV, AP, KFI Radio, USA Today, Huffington Post, all of the above. Elyse is nationally known for her work in helping patients to break free from the diet mentality through the intuitive eating process. Her philosophy embraces the goal of developing body positivity and reconnecting with one's internal wisdom about eating. She supervises and trains health professionals, is a certified eating disorder registered dietitian, a fellow of the International Association of Eating Disorder Professionals, and a fellow of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. So Elyse, what in the world have you not done?
Oh gosh, I used to be an elementary school teacher. We can add that.
Oh my gosh, amazing.
I've never flown a plane. I don't think I ever will.
Okay.
I mean, I've flown in a plane, but I've never flown a plane. I've never been a pilot.
Okay, well, good to know. I'm glad we found something. And definitely flying a plane is not a qualification for your expertise on this topic. So Elyse, first of all, intuitive eating is starting to gain traction and recognition in the mainstream recently, but you literally wrote the book on intuitive eating, the first one many years ago. Can you explain, if people haven't heard of before, or they're wondering, what is this thing? What is intuitive eating exactly?
Well, intuitive eating is getting reconnected with that internal wisdom that we're mostly all born with. Babies know when they're hungry, they cry. If they're responded to, they start to trust their hunger signal. They trust that they'll be fed. When they're done, they turn their heads. You can't get more milk into them. And when they start eating solid foods, if they're given an opportunity to try all different varieties of foods, they know what they like and they know what they don't like. Unfortunately, we get completely disconnected from this through media, diets, body focus, so many things pull us away from our internal wisdom. And actually, the most accurate definition of intuitive eating is a dynamic interplay of instinct, emotion, and thought. And this takes it a little further. So instinct, that comes from that reptilian part of the brain, which is our instinct to stay alive, our survival instinct. And that's what gives us hunger, fullness, taste preferences. Then we also have the emotions. So from the limbic part of the brain, our emotions often will affect our instinctual need to eat. And so we have to keep that in mind. And then we use the neocortex, or the rational part of the brain, in order to be able to speak to the emotions and monitor and help our instincts. So it's not just instinct. Some people are misinformed. They think, oh, well, you just can't eat by instinct alone. And that's true. You can't. Your emotions will affect you, and you need to use your rational thought.
Yeah. I mean, we're complex human beings. We're not animals in that way. So,
right. We're not reptiles.
Right. Yeah. Thank goodness. So why do you think that it's becoming more popular and talked about now?
Well, I think there's a perfect storm of so much about body positivity, health at every size. People are starting to object to being pushed into certain body sizes and having to diet to do that. And I think there's a lot of diet burnout. People have been on one diet after another. Oh my goodness. I mean, I can list them for years and years, and I don't even want to use their names. And I just think that we're coming to a place of rebellion. We don't want to do that anymore. You know, the Me Too movement, we want a special, this is for all genders, of course. However, you know, we don't want to be told how we should look, what we should do. And so there's a distinct thread to health at every size and wanting to get rid of dieting. And so I think that's why it's emerging again now. And it's all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah. And is this something that is also being talked about in schools for children? I know that mindfulness, and even in some cases yoga, and these kinds of practices are being introduced to children. And it's funny because you mentioned in the definition of intuitive eating, getting back in touch with those internal cues that we know as children. But I have seen little snippets of news articles saying that they're trying to start with intuitive eating for children.
Well, yes. And I agree that the mindfulness movement actually supports and promotes intuitive eating, and that, you know, people are meditating more now than they used to, and trying to stay present. So there's a strong part of that. And yes, there's I know a colleague of mine is working very hard in another state to change the dialogue in the schools, get the teachers away from looking at weight and good foods and bad foods, and get more into intuitive eating. I'm so grateful that she's doing that, and it's happening all over the place. And intuitive eating is being taught in many universities now, and is required reading.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great. So let's talk a little bit about the psychology behind intuitive eating. Where does it start to become not intuitive? At what age? What's happening in the brain? What starts to get corrupted that pulls us away from being able to listen and respond well to those internal cues?
Well, I think that's a complex question, because I think if caregivers are actually listening and honoring the child's signals, they don't get pulled away from it. I do think, though, when there's all this worry, obesity epidemic, and pediatricians are telling parents, oh, you should monitor what your child is eating. And I think when parents start to try to control what their children are eating, then that natural rebellious instinct, which it's one of the developmental stages, Erickson's developmental stages, that begins around 18 months, when child's favorite word is no. If you start to try to control what that child's eating and say, no, you have to have so many bites of this before you're allowed to have a cookie, then that rebellion comes up, and children often will just go on a hunger strike. They just won't eat, or they're eating more and sneaking. I have a number of clients who have been told they can't, young clients, that they can't have any sweets or any chips. And whenever they're anywhere where they can find it, they're sneaking it. So I think that need for autonomy, assertion of autonomy, starts early on. And so that's why children's internal signals have to be honored by their parents and their caregiver.
Yeah. So what do you say to the objection that some parents might raise, or really anyone in the field, who says something like, well, if you just let the kid eat whatever they want, they're just going to choose cookies all the time, or they're just going to choose cake all the time. And then they'll be on a sugar high, and you don't understand what I need to do for my kids. Right. I mean, so
Well,
what do you say to that objection?
well, there's a huge responsibility on the parents' part, or again, caregivers, I shouldn't just say parents,
Right.
to offer a variety of foods when the child is very young. And actually, we're doing a 4th edition of intuitive eating. And what we've included in there is baby-led weaning or baby-led solids, which is actually intuitive eating for babies, so that when babies are able to start not necessarily chewing, but gumming and putting foods in their mouths, the family sits together at the table. There's many different vegetables and fruits and grains and, proteins that the family's eating. If the child sees, the role models eating a wide variety of foods and isn't pushed, what happens is that child's palate is wide and can enjoy all those different foods. And then, of course, when they find sugar, if there's nothing said about this is bad, you can't have it, it just becomes part of what they eat. And so, I mean, if you're not sitting with your child, if you're not offering a wide variety of foods and all that child is offered is cookies, early on, well, of course, that's probably what they're going to desire most. So it's the parent's responsibility to, make all this food and have it there and as often as possible eat with the child. And then it's not going to happen. I see it over and over and over. Kids are not going to only eat sweets. I have so many clients. It's a gift, actually. I have helped them return to their intuitive eating, base. They're raising their children as intuitive eaters. Some of them their children are grown up by now, and they'll sit down with a plate of food, and sometimes they'll take the watermelon first, and sometimes they'll take the chicken, and sometimes they'll take the cookie. But they'll get enough. Studies of toddlers show that if you offer toddlers a wide variety of foods, they will be fine. They'll get everything they need. So,
okay, so you heard it here. You heard it from the nutrition expert, ladies and gentlemen.
Right.
And because also it goes into listening to your body. If you only eat sweets, you don't feel good, right? But same with if you only were to eat salty or savory foods, then you would not feel good.
Well, as long as you know that those foods are available forever, that they're not bad, that they're never going to be taken away. See, the problem is people hold this judgment about certain foods, and they think that, well, when they go on the next diet or when they're good again, I'm in quotes, they won't get to have that food. They may go on and on and on and eat foods that aren't going to feel good in their bodies, but they haven't really gone through that process of making peace with food. And knowing that all foods need to be emotionally equivalent. Now, this was something I struggled with early on, 25 years ago. I'm a nutritionist. I have a Master of Science degree in nutrition. I know that broccoli has probably got more nutrients in it than green jelly beans. However, it's about emotional equivalency. So you don't react badly to certain foods, or think you're good for eating other foods.
Yeah. And why, and this is a question I have, why are our emotions so tied to food? Because you're right, it's finding the emotional equivalent. That's right. I mean, giving foods moral value, right? And that ingesting them makes you a good or bad person.
Oh, there's so many aspects of emotions. First of all, the first thing that happens very soon after an infant is born is that infant's given milk, and there's lactose in that. It's sweet and it's comforting. This infant has emerged into the world with all the lights out of the comfy place inside and learns that food is comforting. And there's nothing wrong with food being comforting. We have a whole group of people that think you should never have any emotion attached to eating. I'm the opposite. I think eating needs to be the most satisfying and wonderful, experience, one of the most satisfying and wonderful experiences that we have. So, so there's that aspect of food is comforting. And I think for so many people who've fallen into perfectionism, they feel good about themselves when they think they're doing something A+ perfectly. So they grab onto this good food, bad food piece, the putting moral, emphasis on it, and they feel good about themselves. This is a whole part of orthorexia, where they're only eating certain foods and they feel bad about themselves if they taste something that isn't part of what they deemed okay for them. So I think there's that emotion as well. And emotions also can affect us in many ways. Sometimes when we're very anxious, our appetite goes away. If our adrenaline's running, for some people, they don't feel hungry at all. And then, of course, when they get past that and their hunger comes back, it comes back full force as primal hunger. And then they can't stop eating, and then they get scared. And often people will go back and forth between restriction and overdoing, fearful that they won't be able to stop, and then they restrict. There's that piece of it. So emotions can also just lead you to, want to comfort yourself with food, as I was saying before. So if you're feeling something, feeling a need to have comfort, there's nothing wrong with making a meal that's comforting, of delicious foods that you love, and sitting there and being present and enjoying the comfort of that food.
Yeah. No, I love that. It's so true. And I think it's important to recognize that there are emotions involved with food, and not just in the way that the media or movies portray it as like, oh, that person's eating their feelings, which is such as overly simplified view of the emotional relationship with food. But also that I remember in my own recovery, something someone told me that was so precious. And that was because there can be so much anxiety in the recovery processes of eating around other people or going to a party where there's food and all those things. And someone told me, focus on the relationships, not the food.
That's right.
And of course, because I was in recovery, I was obviously still thinking about the food. I couldn't just ignore it completely, but focusing on getting to know the person in front of me, the conversation, having a good time, actually enjoying myself just blew my mind in the way that I was able to have a good, positive, emotional experience related to the food. The food was a part of it. The friends were a part of it. And acknowledging that can be a good experience and that we don't have to just be so laser focused on the plate in front of us.
Yeah. And you lose out on life when you're sitting there thinking, am I doing this right? How many, ounces should I have? How many grams should I have? So it does open that up. The flip side of that, though, is many people experience social anxiety. Yeah. And so it's scary for them to be with others. So they'll use the focus on the food as a way to not have to feel that. Not have to feel that. And that's something to be working on in therapy. I'm a proponent of therapy for everybody at all times. I've found it increasingly helpful in my life.
Amen. You know what? Megan asked a great question. And hey, Megan, it's great to see you here again. She asks, do we follow societal standards for the same comfort reason when it comes to dieting? And Megan, if maybe you could explain your question a little bit more. I'm not quite sure if that means like that dieting becomes comforting or like a go-to thing, a routine for someone. I'm not quite sure. Elyse, do you have any thoughts on that?
I have some thoughts. I think that there's a lot of diet bonding. Everybody's on the same diet. And so people feel like they're part of a group when they diet like their friends. It's almost like, people who don't drink and are with a group of people who are drinking feel very left out. So with dieting, there are a lot of people that feel left out if they're not dieting like their friends. And so I think it does become an emotional comfort to know that you're doing what other people are doing. Of course, you're not individuating then, you're just being part of the group and not really finding out what you need. I mean, needs are such an important part. What do you need to feel good? Is it being on this diet that everybody else is doing, or might you need to really enjoy food and have a satisfying eating experience? So that may be what she's talking about. I don't know.
Yeah, and actually, she just wrote back. She said the idea of dieting seems relational, and so those relationships seem comforting if you're doing what others are doing. So it's exactly your intuition on that one. Thanks so much, Megan. And just want to encourage you guys, if you're watching and you have any other questions, just dive in at any time. So what are some of the beginning steps? Let's say that someone is, and I think you would probably advise, I've heard that intuitive eating is maybe for people who are very, very severely undernourished, that it's not quite the time to introduce intuitive eating. But once that, like, when is the point in the recovery process where you start to explore this with professional support?
A misconception out there. You can't use intuitive eating early on because people who are undernourished can't trust their hunger and fullness signals.
But you're going to blast that myth out of the water.
I'm going to blast it.
Awesome.
First of all, there are 10 principles of intuitive eating, not just hunger and fullness. So if you start with hunger, if someone who's undernourished feels hunger, I say go for it. That's a signal you can completely trust. You cannot trust fullness, however. And that's the image I give people of this freedom at some point when they're healed to be able to trust their fullness signals. When you're early on, if you're undernourished, the stomach has slowed down, people are full all the time. So they can't say, well, go ahead with principles, hunger and fullness principles, and trust that, because they won't eat enough. But how about all the other principles? How about making peace with food? How about respecting the body? How about dealing with emotions? There's so many other aspects of intuitive eating. So I say we start intuitive eating day one. It's just that the fullness principle cannot be trusted.
Yeah. And I think it's so important to emphasize that that work needs to be done with professional help and support.
Professional help, and not only professional help that is trained in eating disorders, intuitive eating at Health in Every Size, because there's a lot of damage that can be done if people are not trained in that way.
Yeah. So what beginning steps can someone take, especially if they're in an outpatient treatment relationship or working with a dietitian or nutritionist, to start getting in touch with those hunger and fullness cues, to start getting in touch with their emotions related to food? There's a couple underlying principles that we talked about in our little pre-interview chat. And you mentioned the concept of satisfaction, exploring that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. A number of years ago, when we were writing the 3rd edition of Intuitive Eating, a light bulb went off inside of me. And I was thinking, what is it that works best for my clients when I'm working with them? And I realized that when I'm focusing on helping them find satisfaction in eating, it actually informs the other principles. So I don't ever start actually with hunger and fullness, other than if you feel hungry, trust it. I do start with, what would it take for you to have the most satisfaction in your meal? And so I'll ask someone, would you eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich on your way to your favorite restaurant? And everyone says, no, looks at me like, what are you talking about? And I say, why? And they say, well, I won't enjoy my meal because I wouldn't be hungry. So that leads into finding the right amount of hunger to eat. Comfortable hunger gives you the most satisfaction. Primal hunger, where you haven't eaten for many hours, you can't even notice the taste of food because you're just trying to survive and get that food in.
You're very hangry.
Right. And it also informs fullness, because eating when you're not hungry at all is, extending that to you've eaten a lot throughout the day, or you're never allowing yourself to feel hungry. That's not going to give you satisfaction. So being able to tune into the body and know that, every few hours we're going to get that mild, comfortable hunger is going to lead us towards satisfaction. Staying present, and going back to your mindfulness comment, there's so much work that needs to be done in staying present in life right now. And the more present you are when you're eating, paying attention to the qualities of the food, the different sensations, the textures, the colors, the tastes of different foods, enjoying the food. And there's this point at which food does not taste as good as it did when you started, when you were hungry. And I call that the threshold bite. And it's actually based on something called sensory specific satiety, which is hard to get the words out. That's a study in the field of hedonics, of the tastes of, or the pleasantness of food, based on all these different aspects of food. And the participants in these studies rate the food bite by bite in terms of how pleasant it is. And they find that actually after 2 minutes of one particular taste, the pleasantness starts to diminish. Now, usually we eat a variety of foods, so we're going from one thing to the other, but there's a point at which it just doesn't taste as good as it did in the beginning. And that tends to coordinate with the fullness, with the comfortable fullness, I find. So it's an interesting point, but you have to stay present in order to find that. And then you have to deal with sadness. Now, let me throw that in. I believe that whenever we're enjoying something in life, when it has to end, it's natural to feel a level of sadness. You're on a great vacation and it's over and you have to go back to all your responsibilities. You're a little sad, but you go back. Well, in anything, and in eating especially, when you reach that point, that threshold bite, oh my goodness, I'm not going to eat any more of this incredible pasta. I was in Italy last fall and I was Instagramming all my bowls of pasta throughout Italy. There was a point though where it just wasn't as good because I was comfortably full. But knowing that I could have it anytime I wanted to, I could stop, have a moment of sadness, and then that goes away. This is not deep, intense, emotional pain. It's something that moves on. So,
oh, that's so good. I could just listen to you talk all day. I love this stuff. We have got a great question from Whitney I'd love to pose to you. She asks, when you are underweight and trying to restore weight, I've noticed that after the initial refeeding process, I have extreme hunger. Is that something that can be trusted, or is it my body trying to get what it can for self-preservation? I don't want to eat if it's just my body trying to get extra calories before the next possible restriction.
Well, there's something that happens. It's remarkable. I noticed it. Oh, this is back in 1984. I was working in an eating disorder treatment program locally, and people were so hungry all the time as they were restoring weight. And I started to read about it and understood that there's something called hypermetabolism, which happens universally to people who are restoring weight. And they will tell me, oh my God, I ate all this food and I was still hungry. What do I do? And you do want to respond to it because your body is giving you a message. There's this concept of interoceptive awareness, being aware of the messages your body is giving you. And in that period of time, it's an emotional experience to deal with having all of that hunger, which feels excessive, especially after someone had been restricting before. They can't believe how much food they need to satisfy the hunger. So I'm interested in this person's question about, I don't want to respond to this just because my body's telling me this. I think that it's got to be the opposite. Her body is saying to her, feed me, feed me, feed me. My metabolism's so high right now. In order to restore my weight, I'm going to need a lot of food. And trust, and as I mentioned earlier, there's this point at this end process, and I talk about this all the time with people, where you've got this freedom to be able to trust that your body's going to tell you how much food you actually need. Not too much, not too little, but just what you need. But you can't control that. You have to let it happen through the process, and eventually you'll be at that point. And it's so amazing. It's still, intuitive eating still amazes me. I have to tell you this. Yeah. It's just like, whoa, I'll go out for breakfast on Sunday morning and have eggs and pancakes and toast and fruit and milk. And I always have milk and coffee. And I'll have this wonderful, delicious breakfast. I always have permission within myself to eat it all if I need to. I tend to almost never finish it because I get to that point, but if I want to, I can. And then I'm going along doing things, and all of a sudden I'm hungry. It's like, whoa, I'm hungry again. And then I notice it's been, 3 hours since I ate, because I get hungry about every 3 hours.
Yep, me too.
It's just awe in the real meaning of awesome. It's really awesome to me that we can trust that. I love it. Yeah. I had an disorder when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, and I bless it. It brought me into this field. It helped me have most intense empathy for my clients. I know what they're going through. And I'm so freed of that. I've been freed of that for 40 years. It's wonderful. It's wonderful to be able to trust. So. Yeah.
I love that you just got so excited about that, because I feel the same excitement about food and eating and cooking that I never dreamed was possible. I mean, I never thought that would be possible. And now to be able to enjoy that is just unbelievable. And so you're right. We can trust our bodies. And I just want people who are watching and feel like they're never going to be able to, or that that's just not possible, to hear what Elyse is saying and hear what I'm saying. And that it's like, you can enjoy it. And it's so awesome. And it's incredible. And there's so many different amazing kinds of foods that you can taste and enjoy. And it's all good. Like it happens. It does happen.
And this made me think of something, there's this group of people who think you can never recover from an eating disorder. I am the complete opposite. I love the word healing. I don't use recovery. I use healing. And I believe there is full and complete healing. And that comes from my own personal experience and from thousands of clients I've worked with over these. It's actually 37 years at this point. who are fully healed and are living their lives and enjoying food and raising their kids that way if they have kids. It's amazing.
Yeah, so cool. Well, this has been amazing to have you on. But I've got well, two more questions if we can. And we do have two more questions. So if anyone else has got something on their mind that they would love to pose to Elyse, we've got the expert on. So just jump in. You were recently mentioned in a New York Times op-ed about asking the question, why do smart women continue to fall prey to the lies of the wellness industry? And it really addresses the fact that the diet industry has kind of become the wellness industry because of what we talked about at the beginning, that people are over diets and women are sick of being told what to do. Why do smart women, educated and men as well, continue to fall into these traps, and what can they do? Like, what can they look out for? Because this is a whole part of the emotions and the conditioning of the way that we view our bodies and view food. How can we recognize those lies and stay focused on what's going on here rather than what's going on out there?
First of all, I want to applaud the writer of that article. She was my client, and I can say that. I keep HIPAA, but she told people that it was that she was working with, and it was me that she was working with. And I think that as a strong feminist, I mean, way back in the second wave of feminism in the 60s, I think it is so important for us to understand that we are so much more than our weight, our bodies. We are these amazing people who are doing wonderful things in the world. And to really look at why we're so stuck in that old belief that we're not okay unless we're very small. And, so I think it takes therapy, it takes nutrition therapy to really look at what's keeping us in that oppressed place. We have to break out of that. We can't be just objects of people's, opinions and falling into that, as Jessica said, the wellness community, which just really is connected so much with, for most people, they will admit, if you go deeply down into it, yeah, I'm really doing that because I want to be smaller. I want to be thinner. And we have to think of what does it mean to be small? Why is that so honored? People come in all sizes and shapes. People are amazing, no matter what their size or shape or how they look. And I think we have to fight against this. It's a discrimination that, is as prominent as every other discrimination that we have to fight in this world. So we have to do some deep work, really, to see why we're so connected to that.
Yeah, and I think not being afraid to take up space, and I mean that both physically, and I mean that with our opinions, our voices, our desires. Women are so often told they're too much, or not enough and too much at the same time. Like, how is that possible? But that's what women usually are. And
that goes back to in the 70s, when women started to realize that they had power, they could earn a living, they could have babies without having to have be married to have a baby,
and access to contraception. Yeah.
And I think that they could have sex. Yeah. I think that was very threatening, and I think there was a certain group of men that got threatened by that, who wanted to pick small women to feel control over them.
Interesting.
And so, we have to own our own power and our own voice and our own meaning and value. There's a little exercise I will do with some of my clients. I'll ask them to think of some woman they know in their lives, or not in their lives, could be dead or alive, and to think about the qualities of that person. And I ask them to tell me the qualities. And they'll invariably mention they're funny, they're smart, they're successful, they're, on and on. They never say they're small.
Yeah, good.
This doesn't just apply to, it's all genders. It's not simply women. It's a very powerful and scary evil that we have to attack, for no matter what your gender is. It's not okay to be small. It's just the reason I mentioned women is that that's where it began.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks. Such amazing points. And like I said, we could talk for hours. Um, but last question that I have for you, and that is one I ask each one of our guests, and that's that if someone is watching this and they're in a really dark place in their healing journey, or they're really struggling, especially with the food,
Yes.
what can you say to encourage them?
We all deserve to have our needs met. It's something that we suppress early on. Often, if there's abuse, if there is neglect in early childhood, people will often push away their needs. They're told they're too needy. It's much easier for them to say, I don't have needs, than to have needs and not have them met. And so one of these needs is to enjoy food, to have that satisfaction we talked about before. And that satisfaction will come as they're healing their physical, restriction, or their physical, the problems that have happened physically, as they're healing their beliefs about food, as they're healing their emotions. And there will come a day, and I promise, because I've done this for so long, there will come a day when you can sit down in any place, anyone's home, any restaurant, your own home, and enjoy food. And it's such a gift. Why shouldn't we have that wonderful gift? Life is painful. Life is hard. There's many things that happen that we have to deal with. Why should we negate this wonderful experience of having satisfaction in food? So when people are struggling, imagine that time when you're going to feel safe and free with your eating and be able to trust your body. So that's what I would say.
So wonderful. Elyse, thank you so, so much for taking the time to share your wisdom, your many years of experience doing this and seeing people heal, for sharing all of that with us. We so appreciate it.
You're welcome. And I want to just throw one other little thing in. My new book, my Intuitive Eating Workbook.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, Intuitive Eating Workbook for Teens, which came out in April. I had a lot of fun writing that book. I wrote it in teen language. It's just right in your face. Yeah. And I'm finding that my adult clients are loving it because it's bringing them back, as they're doing the exercises, it's bringing them back to their teen years. For most people, it starts early on. It rarely starts in adulthood. It starts sometime in childhood or teen years. And it's helping them heal a lot of what happened then. So I just want to throw that out. It's a fun book.
Absolutely. And actually right now, Elyse, I'm putting it in the comments. So if you're watching, we've got the link here. And I put the Amazon link there. Is that the best one?
That's perfect. That's great.
Okay. The Intuitive Eating Workbook for Teens. All right. So it is there in the comments, the link, so you can go pick it up on Amazon. And as Elyse mentioned, it's good for all ages, not just teens. So
we all have that teen in us, we keep that rebellious teen in us all of our lives.
It's so true. And I know that we all know people that we look at and go, yeah, that person didn't grow up, right? There's still a teenager.
I was listening to this book in the car as I was driving to work, and the protagonist was, her boyfriend had told her, wear that pink dress. And she said, no, and she didn't say it to him, but she put on a green dress. She said, I don't like it when he tries to control me and tell me what color dress I'm wearing. I mean, that's a healthy part of us, that rebellious, autonomous, part of us. So yeah, we all have that teen within us.
Absolutely. So great. Well, yeah. So if you want to check out that book, it is right there in the comments section. And also Elyse has a great website as well. There you can read all about her, the work, get all the links to the intuitive eating books that she's written. So I am going to put that in the comments as well for you guys. So you can go check out more of her great work. So hold on a second. Let me just put this in our comments here. Perfect. All right. Well, Elyse, you have been a joy. Thank you so much. And
so thank you, Kristen. I love talking to you.
Thank you. We'll have to have you back on it. And Elsa also says goodbye.
Oh, bye, Elsa.
My little intuitive eater over here.
Of course, most animals are.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you so much for watching as well. And we will see you next week for another episode of Weekly Hope. All right. Thanks, guys.